She doesn't want nobody she wants to be in control of her body and choose who she wants to give it to. And no one can come up and touch it or take it or tell her what to do with it. It's up to her what she does with it. So I feel like that.
Hold on. Stop scrolling. Because what I'm about to tell you, this isn't a rumor. This isn't some tabloid gossip somebody cooked up for clicks. This is the story that the mainstream media is sitting on right now, and I genuinely need you to hear it. You know Kim Kardashian, right? Of course you do. Billions of dollars, the most followed person on Instagram, basically built an empire out of thin air. Now, what if I told you that empire might have some very dark money running through it? Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Kanye West, the man who was once the love of her life, the father of her children, he's been talking. And not just regular bitterex talking. We're talking names, connections, and receipts that reportedly landed on the desk of federal investigators. Now think about this for a second. Why would law enforcement even entertain something like this? Because they don't raid people based on feelings. They raid people based on evidence. And the word coming from people close to this situation is that Kim's circle has been under a microscope for months, quietly, carefully, while she's out here doing magazine covers and launching new brands. But here's the twist that nobody is talking about. The real question isn't whether Kim knew. The real question is, how deep does this go? Because if the names connected to her are who people are whispering about, this isn't just a celebrity scandal. This is something that could shake a lot of very powerful people that I've been sitting on this information. I had to verify it. And now, I'm ready to walk you through every single detail. Stay with me. Because this is about to get wild. Let me take you back. Because to understand where we are right now, you need to understand how we got here. And trust me, the timeline on this is something else. Kim Kardashian did not become a billionaire by accident. I know people like to joke about it, like to dismiss it, but that woman built something from nothing, or at least that is the story she has been selling for years. The makeup, the shapewear, the apps. The reality television empire that ran for 2 decades and made the Kardashian name more recognizable than most world leaders. On paper, it is a beautiful American success story. A mother, an entrepreneur, a mogul who turned a moment of public humiliation into a billion-dollar brand. But here is what people have been quietly whispering about in certain circles, and I am not talking about gossip blogs or tabloids. I am talking about people who are close to the business, people who have watched this family operate from the inside. The question was never whether Kim was smart enough to build all of this. The question was who was behind the money, and where exactly that money was coming from. Now Kanye West. Say what you want about that man. He is chaotic, he is unpredictable, he has burned nearly every bridge he ever built, professionally, personally, publicly. But there is one thing you cannot take away from Kanye, and that is the fact that he was inside that world for over a decade. He was not just a husband. He was a business partner, a collaborator, someone who sat in the rooms where real decisions were made. He knows where the skeletons are. And for a long time, even after the divorce, even after the public meltdowns, even after everything, he kept his mouth shut about certain things. That silence ended. Here is what started circulating late last year among people who follow federal investigation activity closely. Kanye, in the middle of his very public spiral, was not just rambling. Some of what he was saying, the specific names, the specific locations, the specific language he was using, lined up with ongoing investigations that had nothing to do with celebrities and everything to do with organized criminal networks operating through legitimate business fronts. Businesses that look clean on the outside. Businesses that move money. Businesses that, if you trace them far enough back, connect to supply chains that federal agents have been watching for years. Now I want to be very careful here, because this is where the story gets serious, and I am not going to throw around accusations I cannot walk you through properly. What I will tell you is this: federal law enforcement does not move on people like Kim Kardashian based on an ex-husband having a public breakdown. They do not show up with resources, with warrants, with investigators because of a tweet or an interview. When they move, it is because they have been building something. Quietly. Methodically. For a long time. And the word coming from people who would know, people adjacent to the legal world around this case, is that Kanye did not just rant. He talked, formally, to people who had the authority to act on what he said. The difference between a celebrity going on a podcast and saying wild things versus sitting down and providing information that investigators can actually verify and use, that difference matters enormously. And right now, that distinction is at the center of everything. So what exactly did he say? What are the specific connections that have people in certain legal circles genuinely concerned? And more importantly, why is Kim, who has one of the most powerful PR machines on the planet, suddenly so quiet about all of this? We are going to get into every single layer of it. Because what is coming next in this story is the part that nobody saw coming. And honestly, once you hear it, it is going to completely change the way you look at everything this family has built. Here is where it gets specific. And this is the part that mainstream entertainment media will not touch, because the moment you start connecting these dots, you are no longer talking about a celebrity divorce. You are talking about something that involves people far more dangerous than anyone in Hollywood. One of the things that came up, and this has been corroborated by more than one source independently, is the network of shell companies that were quietly set up around the peak years of the Kardashian business expansion. We are talking roughly 2015 through 2020. During that window, the Kardashian brand was not just growing, it was exploding in markets that, if you look at them carefully, do not make complete sense for a beauty and lifestyle brand. Certain regions of Latin America, certain distribution partnerships in places where legitimate business infrastructure is thin but cash movement is extremely heavy. Now ask yourself, why would a shapewear company need that level of international financial architecture? Why would a makeup brand require the kind of legal shielding that typically gets built around entities that need to move money without too many questions being asked? That is not standard business practice. That is something else entirely. Kanye saw this. He was not just a celebrity husband sitting at home while Kim ran her empire. He was actively involved in meetings, in deals, in conversations that most people around Kim never had access to. He had the kind of proximity that only a spouse gets, the unguarded moments, the phone calls you are not supposed to hear, the names that get mentioned casually at dinner that you are not supposed to remember. Kanye remembered everything. And when the marriage collapsed, not just emotionally but operationally, because these two were financially entangled in ways the public never fully understood, Kanye did not just walk away angry. He walked away with information. Detailed, specific, verifiable information about transactions, about relationships, about certain individuals connected to Kim's business circle who have no legitimate reason to be anywhere near a beauty brand. The name that keeps coming up, and I am going to be deliberate here because I am not going to throw out unverified names carelessly, is not someone you would recognize from any red carpet. This is someone who operates entirely in the background. Someone whose connection to Kim's circle was structured very carefully to look like a business investment. A minority stake in one of the subsidiary companies. Clean on paper. Completely traceable on paper. But when you look at where that investment money actually originated, the trail goes somewhere that federal investigators have been watching for a very long time. This is how cartel money works in 2024 and 2025, by the way. It does not show up in a bag. It does not look dirty. It comes through holding companies, through investment vehicles, through licensing deals and brand partnerships that are structured by attorneys who know exactly what they are doing. It moves through celebrities who, in many cases, genuinely do not know the full picture of who is sitting on the other side of a deal. And in some cases, the cases that prosecutors care about, the celebrity does know, or knew enough to look away. Which category Kim falls into, that is the central question right now. And based on what Kanye reportedly disclosed, investigators are not treating her as an innocent bystander. They are treating her as someone who had enough access, enough information, and enough financial benefit to warrant a very serious and very close look. The raid, and I want to walk you through exactly what happened that day, what they were looking for, and what they reportedly found. That is where this entire story shifts from speculation into something that has real, documented, undeniable weight. Because what came out of that day is not something Kim's team can spin. It is not something a publicist can manage. And it is not something that goes away quietly. The raid did not happen the way you would imagine it. There were no helicopters. There were no cameras. There was no dramatic moment captured on TMZ because the people executing it made absolutely sure there would not be. This was a controlled, quiet surgical operation, and that restraint alone tells you everything about how seriously federal investigators were taking this. When they want spectacle, they give you spectacle. When they want results, they move the way they moved here. Early morning, a team of agents, not local law enforcement, federal, arrived at a property connected to Kim's business operations. Not her personal residence. a property tied to one of the subsidiary entities that had been flagged during the financial review. They came with a warrant that had been signed off at a level that does not happen for minor cases. The scope of that warrant, according to people familiar with the filing, covered financial records, communications, and this is the detail that matters, records of third-party relationships. Meaning they were not just looking at Kim. They were looking at everyone she had been doing business with. Now think about what that means practically. A warrant that broad, targeting communications and third-party relationships, is not built to catch one person. It is built to pull a thread and see how far the network goes. Federal investigators do not request that level of access unless they already have enough to justify it. And justifying it means showing a judge, on paper with documented evidence, that there is probable cause to believe that criminal activity was conducted through or around those business relationships. They found what they came for. I am not going to sit here and tell you exactly what was in those records, because that information is still inside an active investigation and the specific details have not been confirmed publicly. But what I can tell you, based on what people close to this situation have said, is that what investigators pulled from that property significantly widened the scope of the investigation rather than narrowing it. That is prosecutor language for, we found more than we expected. Here is where Kim's team made a critical mistake. In the days following, instead of going completely silent, which is what any competent attorney would advise, certain people in her circle started making quiet calls to media contacts. Not to deny anything specific, not to issue a statement, just to shape the narrative before it broke. To plant the idea that this was all connected to Kanye's instability, that anything he may have said to investigators should be viewed through the lens of a mentally unwell man with a grudge against his ex-wife. That move backfired, because federal investigators are aware when subjects of an investigation attempt to influence public perception during an active case. It does not look like innocence. It looks like consciousness of guilt. And it gave prosecutors something additional to work with in terms of demonstrating that the people around Kim understood exactly what was at stake and were actively trying to manage it. Kanye, for his part, went quiet around this same time. Not because he was done talking, but because his attorneys told him to stop talking publicly about anything connected to this situation. That silence from someone who almost never stops speaking publicly should tell you something. When Kanye West goes quiet, it is not because he ran out of things to say. It is because someone with legal authority over his situation told him that what he knows is now part of something that requires careful, deliberate handling. And that brings us to the part of this story that has not been reported anywhere. The name that connects Kim's business circle to the cartel-linked investment structure is not someone from entertainment. It is not someone from fashion. It is someone whose name you would see in a financial filing and immediately recognize as legitimate, because that is exactly how it was designed to appear. And once I walk you through who this person is and how the connection was built, everything else in this story is going to lock into place. The individual at the center of this financial connection is a man who has spent the last 15 years building an identity inside legitimate private equity. Offices in Miami, a secondary presence in Mexico City. On paper, he is exactly what he presents himself as. A regional investment director who specializes in consumer brands across emerging markets. Clean LinkedIn profile, quotes in trade publications. The kind of person who gets invited to panels at business conferences and says all the right things about sustainable growth and market diversification. His entry point into the Kardashian business structure came through a licensing arrangement, not a direct investment in schemes or in any of the flagship brands that people would recognize. It came through one of the smaller holding entities that sits 3 layers underneath the main brands in the corporate structure. The kind of entity that does not appear in press releases. The kind of entity that exists, legally, to manage regional distribution rights and to receive revenue from international wholesale accounts. Invisible to the public. Perfectly structured to receive money that needs a legitimate destination. What Kanye told investigators, and this is the detail that moved this from a financial irregularity case into something that crossed into organized crime territory, is that this individual was not just a passive investor. He was an active participant in directing where certain international revenue was reported and where it was not. He was involved in conversations about which markets to emphasize in official filings and which to keep deliberately vague. Those are not the conversations a legitimate minority stakeholder has. Those are the conversations of someone who is managing the financial architecture on behalf of people whose money cannot be explained publicly. Now, did Kim understand the full picture of who this man was and what his money represented? That is the question that investigators have been trying to answer for the better part of 18 months. And based on what has come out of the document review from the raid, the evidence suggests she was not as far removed from those conversations as her legal team is currently arguing. There are communications, not direct but close enough, that place her in awareness of certain decisions about how international revenue was being categorized. Not the source of the money, but the categorization of it. And in federal law, knowing about the movement of money that originates from criminal activity and choosing not to act on that knowledge has a specific legal name. It is not a minor charge. This is also where the Paris robbery comes back into the conversation. And I know that sounds like a left turn, but stay with me. When Kim was robbed in Paris in 2016, the official narrative was always that she was targeted because she was too visible on social media about her jewelry. Criminals saw an opportunity and took it. That story was accepted publicly because it was plausible and because nobody had a reason to look deeper. But there is a version of events that investigators have been examining, quietly, carefully, that suggests the robbery was not random, that it was connected to a debt dispute, that certain individuals who felt they were owed something used that moment to collect. A robbery as a message, not a crime of opportunity but a controlled act of pressure. If that version is accurate, and again, this is what investigators are actively working to establish, not something that has been proven in any court, then the Paris robbery is not a standalone traumatic event in Kim Kardashian's life. It is a data point inside a much larger pattern of relationships, obligations, and financial arrangements that stretch back further than anyone has publicly reported. And this is the moment where everything that seems separate, the shell companies, Kanye's disclosures, the raid, the Paris robbery, the mystery investor, starts to connect into a single coherent picture. A picture that federal prosecutors right now are building into something they intend to present formally. The only remaining question is who gets charged first, and whether Kim's legal team can create enough distance between her and the people at the center of this before that moment arrives. Now you understand why this story is not on the front page of every major news outlet right now. Because the people who control those outlets have relationships, financial relationships, legal relationships, with the same world that this investigation is pulling apart. This is not conspiracy. This is just how power protects itself. And the only reason you are hearing any of this is because there are still spaces like this one where that protection does not reach. This investigation is not over. The charges have not been filed yet. The full picture is still developing, and when the next move happens, and it will happen, it is going to move fast and it is going to be loud. When that moment comes, I will be here with everything. Not 12 hours later. Not after every other channel has already covered it. First, with the full context, the full background, and everything you need to actually understand what you are looking at. So if you are not subscribed yet, do that right now. Not as a favor to me, as a favor to yourself. Because the people who are subscribed are the people who will know what is happening before the rest of the internet even wakes up to it. Hit the bell. Turn on every notification. Because the next update on this story is coming sooner than anyone expects. And you do not want to be the last person in the room to find out.